Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us as we learn Torah Hashem. We are broadcasting now from our bungalow in upstate New York, South Fallsburg, in the beautiful Elmshade Estate Colony, and we start with Hakar Satayv to TorahAnytime.com for giving us a platform in over 100 countries, and to Coalition for its global network, to Torah Communications Network, to our audience on YouTube, on Facebook, our wonderful Zoomers, our subscribers, the Olam in the Agudas Yisrael Beizev of Fairways. Tonight we have two very special sponsors, dedicated Talmidim of mine, Kirill and Mary Vorobeichik, who are honoring this evening Mary's brother in memory of Joel Estrada, a decorated Marine who fought in Iraq, and his neshama should have an aliyah. We are also dedicated anonymously by wife in loving memory of her husband Gershon Ben Baruch, and loving memory of her father Yehuda Dov Simcha Ben Uri Aaron Yeshaya HaKayin. Their neshama should have an aliyah. They should be Melitza Yosha for their families, for all of Klal Yisrael, and they should have a Lichter Gegan Eden. If you would like to sponsor Parshas Pinchas, we do not yet have any sponsors for Parshas Pinchas. 718-916-3100. That's 718-916-3100. rmmwsi@aol.com. Bilam was motivated to say, Matovu Ahalecha Yaakov. How good are your tents, Yaakov? Mishkanaisecha Yisrael. Your tabernacles, Yisrael. The Tufchi Yabiyu speaks about the uniqueness of Klal Yisrael, the centrality of the beauty of the Jewish home. And of course, this is primarily the shalom, the harmony, the tranquility, the peace between husband and wife, because that's what oil refers to. We know that at Matan Torah, the men and the women had to separate to be prepared to meet the Shekhinah. And then afterwards, Moshe Rabbeinu told them, Shuvu lachem la'ahalechem. Go back to your tents. Oyel ze ishtay. And that's what we know, that then when there is shalom between a husband and wife, then Matovo Alecha Yaakov, then Ish v'Isha Shalom Beineim, Shechina Shriya Beineim. Then they have a Mishkan. That's what we wish a Chassid Kala, that they should be Zaycha to be Baina a Mikdash Mat, a Mishkan. That's Mishkan Eisecha Yisrael. Now, of course, when it says Matovu Alecha Yaakov, it also refers to Torah, because Ein Toiv El Torah should have a Kilekach Toiv Nosati Lachem, right? Torasi Al Tazayvu, and of course the Av, who was the personification of Torah, is Yaakov. Yaakov Ish Tam Yoshev Oalim, and the Oyalim were the Oyal of Shem and Aver. That's why it says Oyalim in the plural, the yeshivas of Shem and Aver. But Matovu Alecha also refers to the institution of marriage, because we know that Toiv also refers to marriage, like it says Matzah Isha Matzah Toiv, and it says Le Toiv Heyoisa Adam Levada. Now, the nature of a man and a woman are completely different. They are driven by completely different motors. The Gemara says, Ein simcha le'ish ela babasa. A good steak. A good steak. It says, Ein simcha le'isha ela bebegadim meguatzim. With garments. With takshitin. With jewelry. A man and a woman They're different. There's a blatant difference between the makeup of a man and a woman. A man has a natural drive to get for whatever he does. That's an absolute must for the survival of the Jewish home. Could you imagine if the husband is a plumber, and when he shows up and he plunges the 3 toilets, the lady of the house says, it was a hard week. Could you, let it go this time? And he says, okay. Then he goes to a shul, and they have a terrible plumbing problem. He works for 3 days, and the rabbi says, the shul is struggling. Could you, could you give a donation? He says, okay. And then finally he's called over to a school. They have the boys' bathroom, has 9 toilets, and they're all clogged. And he works for 4 days, and the principal says, there's a lot of children that didn't pay tuition, we don't have the money. And he turns around, comes home, at the end of the week, his wife says, okay, I gotta go, I gotta pay the butcher, I gotta go pay the grocery, I gotta pay the cleaning lady, I have to pay the rent. Could you give me some of the money you made? He said, I didn't make anything. It can't work. So Hashem made it that a man has to get paid. That's his inclination. Otherwise, the family wouldn't be able to survive. Now let's look at a woman. The woman says to her 2-day-old baby that she brought home from the hospital, she changes the diaper, and then says to the baby, what are you going to do for me? Then she gives the baby a bath. She puts on the lotion. She puts on the lotion and the shampoo, kind of fresh, stretchy. Then the baby vomits. And she says, look, until you pay me, I'm not giving you another bath. It doesn't work that way. If she's going to wait to get paid for every meal she serves to her family, the kids would starve. So Hashem made it, as we see from Eliezer's test of Rivka, that a woman should have an avas chesed. The Rabbi Yonason Eibshit says that's why it says that Rivka went out v'kado al shichma, with a picture on her shoulder, to advertise, I'm available. Because if she didn't have an avas chesed, we'd be in trouble. So there's a basic inclination difference between a woman and a man. I always wanted to learn that's why the men fell apart in Egypt and the women didn't. And that's even though the women were given the men's jobs. That was Avodas Perach. So the women were the one that made the bricks. They didn't fall apart. Why? The men fell apart for 117 years. They were working and they weren't getting paid. A man doesn't work without getting paid. If he does, he's emasculated. The men couldn't take it. The women, it wasn't so jarring. They never get paid. That's why the women, it says, "B'schus nashim tzidkani ha'isha ador nigalu." The motor of men and the motor of women are completely different in many areas. Many areas. And therefore it begs the question. Even in the arena of intimacy, the the woman, she doesn't get pleasure right away. The man, it's almost instantaneous excitement. It's a whole different world. How do they coexist? So it's very important to know that the pasuk tells us in Mishlei, B'ritzos Hashem darchei ish, when Hashem finds favor in the ways of man, Gam oivav yashlim itai. Even his enemies will make peace with him. And shockingly, it says in the Medrash in Mishlei, who are oivav? Ze ishtai. That's his wife. A wife is an enemy? The answer is, an enemy means an opponent, a misnagate. By nature, a man and a woman are going in opposite ways. You know, there's another pasuk. The pasuk says, "Moitzi asirim b'kaisharos." Hashem takes out those that are asirim, those that are incarcerated, b'kaisharos, with chains. Again, the Medrash says this is referring to a husband and wife that are chained together. And the Medrash says b'kaisharos stands for b'chi v'shiroi. Sometimes there's crying, sometimes there's song. The marital union is not natural. Because a husband and wife, they're going in different directions. They're not the same type of people. But what is it? So here the pasuk tells us the key. This is the Matoivu Alecha Yaakov. B'ritzos Hashem darchei ish. When Hashem finds favor in the ways of a man, then gam oivav yashlim itai. There's a famous story from the Netziv. The great Netziv, who wore so many hats. He was the Shiva of the mother of all yeshivas Volozhin. He was also the Rav of the extremely large town Volozhin, in charge of all the Shlachtaises and Bikur Chaylim and the Chevra Kadisha. A man came to the Netziv and says he was having trouble with his wife. So the Netziv asked him if he learns at home. And the man got frustrated. He said, look, we could talk about that another time. But now I'm talking about my marriage. It's on the ropes. So again, the Netziv persisted. Are you learning at home? And again, the man got irritated. And the Netziv told him, you have to know that your learning determines the quality of your marriage. B'ritzos Hashem darkei ish. When Hashem finds favor in the ways of a man, then gam oivav yashlim itai. You should know that there's a famous Gemara. The Gemara tells us, but Marava Imre in the West, in Eretz Yisrael, they used to ask the chassan, a while after the marriage, matzah or motzeh? Is it matzah isha matzah taiv, or is it motzeh ani asa isha mar memavas? Which one is it? So of course it begs the question, what kind of a question is that? Did he get a lemon? Did he get a bad deal? Even if he did, if he would say it, it would be Lashon Hara. Remember, it's Lashon Hara even if it's true. How could you ask a person that? The answer is no, we're not asking that at all. We're telling him, if it's not good, it's because of you. It's not because of her. Because b'tzos Hashem darkei ish gam oivav yashlim itai. That's also, it says that Hashem made a wife, an ezer kenegdai. Zacha nasa lo ezer, lo zacha nasa kenegdai. That means that if the man is Zoicha, if he is Zoicha, then she's going to be an Ezer. It's up to him. It's not natural, but B'ritzais Hashem darkei ish gam oivav yashel mitai. Now, one of the things that a man can do to make his marriage great, we could see from a very fundamental Gemara in Masechta Sanhedrin. Gemara in Sanhedrin tells us, at Sanhedrin Yud Tesamid Beis, if you want to look it up, the Gemara in Sanhedrin teaches us about the remarkable person of Palti ben Laish. Now, Palti ben Laish, the Gemara tells us that he had a greater schus than Yosef HaTzadik. Who was Palti ben Laish? Michal Basho, Michal, the daughter of King Shaul, was married to David HaMelech. Shaul paskin, because of a technicality, that the marriage to David was not legal. And therefore he married Michal off to Palti ben Laish. Now, Palti ben Laish here was in a bind. He had to listen to Shaul. You don't listen to the king, you're married b'malchus, you get executed. But the halacha in reality was like David. So really Michal was really an Eishes Ish. So he found himself living in a bedroom with another man's wife. Adultery is a death sentence. So what did Palti ben Laish do? He took a sword, a raw sword, and stuck it in between their beds and said, whoever crosses this sword deserves to be impaled with the sword. And it says all the years that he lived with Michal Bashal, he never touched her. Not only weren't they intimate, but he never touched her. Now, the Gemara asks in Sanhedrin, but there's a problem. The pasuk says, "Vayelech ita isha," that her husband went with her. Now, isha is a lashon of ishus, of sexuality. That implies that they did have relations. So the Gemara answers, "She nasa laki isha." He treated her like a husband. So the Gemara asks, what is it? Rashi says, what does it mean he treated her like a husband? If they didn't have intimacy, what does it mean that he treated her like a husband? So listen to the holy Rashi. Rashi says 3 words. Shaya megadla umechavava. He made her great, and he showed her that he thought she was special. He thought she was desirable. That's the role of a husband. A husband is supposed to be megadel his wife, to make her important, and to show that she is desired, that she is wanted. The Heilige Chazon Yecheskel, he married the granddaughter of the Ridvaz. Ridvaz was one of the Gedolei Adar. The Chazon Yecheskel used to say, when he talked to the Rebbetzin, he says, you know, when I close my eyes, when I listen to you, I hear the wisdom of your grandfather. I hear the wisdom of the Ridvaz. That's how he megadol his wife. It's well known that the great Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, the Rav Harashi of Yerushalayim, the venerable Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, Zech Tzadik L'Brachas Chusi Yagen Aleinu, a wonderful sefer, biography was written, Yerushalayim of old. He used to say to his Rebbetzin, you know, for sure you're going to get Olam Haba. because your whole life you were Moshe Nefesh that I should learn Torah. And when you get to Olam Haba, you'll ask, please, that I should be able to stay with you. That's what he used to tell his wife. I've recommended to many people that they should buy the biography of Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, the ArtScroll biography. It's a masterpiece. So in the ArtScroll biography of Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, it says that when his wife went to the grocery, he would sit near the window listening to see when she came back to be able to help her to bring the bags from the car. Famous Maisa with Rabbi Yaakov. This is such a famous story. You know, I was there at this good convention many years ago, over 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, probably 35 years ago. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky was coming in to the convention during one of the keynote sessions with Reb Schneur Kotler. And there was a door behind the dais from the kitchen that you could come in through the kitchen straight onto the dais. Now the Gemara says, Man de makif chaye, one who goes in a circuitous route in order not to trouble everyone to stand up for them, will live. So Rav Schneur said we should go in through the kitchen, this way we don't have to come in the front door, and hundreds, if not 1,000 people don't have to stand up for us. So Rabbi Yaakov said, no, we're going to come in through the main door, because our wives are there. And our wives, they have to put up with people meeting us at every hour, and therefore they deserve to see us given honor. This is the way a husband wants to be megadol and mechavev his wife. I saw a pshat from Rav Shimshon Mr. Poli. You know, Esther Amalka told the Anshe Knesset Agdayla, Kavuni l'dayrais, affix me for all generations. Esther Amalka knew that there are lessons in the Megillah l'dayrais. It was for all times. And sometimes these lessons, you don't see them right away. You need great people like Reb Shimshon Mr. Poli to mine them out, to excavate them. This is an amazing pshat. Remember that when Mordechai told her that she has to go in and risk her life, even though the king said that if a person comes in unbidden and he doesn't stretch out his sharvet hazov, his scepter, the guards will cut off the person's head. But he told Esther that she has to go in. There's no time to be lost. So she comes in after fasting 3 days, and she is ready to die. Vayoshet hamelech leEsther es sharvet hazov asher biyadai. And the king stretched out the scepter of gold which was in his hand. Vatikrav Esther, and Esther came close. Vatiga b'rosh hashar, and touched the head of the scepter. So of course we know that Esther is one of the 24 Sifrei Tanakh. There isn't an extra letter. Esther Beruach HaKodesh Nemra. So Rav Shamshin asked two obvious questions. I say it's obvious only because I know it. To the casual reader, it's not obvious at all. But once it's pointed out to us, we say, yeah, that's a good question. It says, Vayoshen HaMelech leEsther es sharvet hazov asher biyadai. It should have said, Vayoshen HaMelech leEsther es sharvet hazov. Obviously, if he stretched it out, it was in his hand. So asher biyadai is extra. And then it says, Vatikra Esther vatiga b'rosh hashar. And Esther came close, and she touched the head of the Sharvet. It should have just said Vatikra Vesta, Vatiga Bereisha. We would know it's the Sharvet. Why does it have to say Bereisha Sharvet? So Reb Shamshin says an amazing pshat. She said when Esther appeared, so Hashem made it that she should be Motzah Chein Be'eni Achashverosh. Achashverosh was filled with love for his wife. So he didn't just stretch out the scepter. What he did is he reversed it. And he took the part that he was holding and he gave it to her. As if to say, you don't need me to stretch it out. You're queen. And you have the power to stretch yourself. So he gave her what he was holding in his hand. And that fits in the pasuk. He gave her the part that he was holding in his hand. As if to say, I honor you as if you were me. And what did she do? She gave right back the honor. But Tikra of Esther, she came close, Vatiga Bereisha Sharvet, and she touched the part that was now in his hand, saying, no, I don't want to take away your power, you're king. And I touch what everybody else touches, what you're now holding. Bereisha Sharvet, what was the original tip of the Sharvet, and not what he extended her. And this formula, says Reb Shamshin, Mr. Poli, that if he honors her and she honors him, that's the Matoivu Alecha Yaakov, that's the Mishkan Eisecha Yisrael. The Tufchi Abiyu says that we know that after Yaakov stole the brachas, so Rivka said to Yaakov, he wants to kill you, so go to Lavan and flee. She didn't tell that to her husband. To her husband she said, I don't want Yaakov to marry like the daughters of Ches, like Esav. So therefore, let's send him to Lavan to get married over there. So why didn't she tell Yitzchak what she told Yaakov? That, I think Esav is jealous and he might harm our son. Let's send him away for safety. So I always learned that the reason why she didn't tell that to Yitzchak is she wanted to spare Yitzchak Vayav Yitzchak as Esav. She wanted to spare Yitzchak the grim reality that his son was a murderer. Right? It says that when it says Hashem Beirach es Avram Bakol, part of the bracha is that he didn't see Esav go l'tar b'sara. That's a grief. So in order to save Yitzchak from that grief, she wanted to shield him from it and said, no, let him go to get married. And we know that she shielded Yitzchak because all that time, years ago, when Vayitzraytza Abon Mikirba, and Shem told her that V'rav Yavay Tzair, she never told that to her husband. She didn't want to give him the grim news. But the Tufchi Abiyu brings down Mirabo Seinu, he doesn't say from who, but he brings down from Rabbi Seinu that how did Rivka know that Esav was plotting to kill Yaakov? Esav said that to himself, Yikruvu Yemei Evel Avi, when the morning of my father comes. But how did Rivka know? So the Tufchi Abiyu says she knew it b'nevuah. And the reason why she didn't tell it to her husband, because she didn't want Yitzchak to feel bad that Hashem gave her nevuah and not to Yitzchak. She had that adinas nafsha, that her husband shouldn't feel bad that his wife was given a nevuah and not him. That's the way couples think about one another. On the subject of legadlo lechavava, to make her feel big, to make her desirous, very interesting that the Aleinu L'Shabeach, this is something, a couple with children in the house, this is such a beautiful minhag to adopt. Or when you have a lot of grandchildren in the home. The Aleinu L'Shabeach brings down that in the holy house of Rav Yosef Tzvi dinner, when they were by the Shabbos table surrounded by their family, when they sang Eishes Chayil and got up to Va'at Olis al Kulana, Rabbis Banas Asul Chayil, Va'at Olis al Kulana, you tower above them all the children would point at the mother. Everybody would point at the mother, Va'at Olis al Kulana. It's interesting that Mrs. Luxemburg, who wrote the Sefer Achois Lanu Ketana, says that it's 50 years from when she was a little girl and saw this minhag in the house of Rav Yosef Tzvi dinner, and what an impression it made upon her. Rav Shach, the Gadol Adar, would go to the home of Rav Wosner to sell his chametz. And when he would come there, Rav Wosner would ask the Rosh Hashiva to please give a bracha to his wife. On the pasuk of Matoivu V'alecha Yaakov, Mishkanesecha Yisrael, Rabbi Yonasan Eibshit says that it's so vital for Shalom Bayis to have open communication. He says we learn this from the brothers of Yosef. By the brothers of Yosef it says V'lo yachlu dabroi l'shalom. They weren't able to talk in peace. They didn't have communication. If they would have had communication, then they could have addressed, why did you tell Father about us? What were you thinking that we ate Eva Menachai? What were you thinking? When you have open communication, then there could be, a person could defend themselves, a person could ask for forgiveness, and slowly the problem, the hatred diminishes. When there isn't communication and people just bury it and they let it simmer and they stew on it, then the hatred gets deeper and deeper. And therefore that's why open communication in a marriage is so important, unless if a person is able to forget. That's why I told you once from the Telzer Rosh Hashiva, Rav Keller, he said anything that won't bother you in 3 hours, it's not kedai to bring up. If it's not going to bother you in 3 hours, then just forgive and forget. What are you getting all tzitzt about something that you'll forget in 3 hours? But how could she say that? How could he do such a thing? If it's not going to bother you in 3 hours, then just forget about it. I want to go on to another subject over here. It really is a fascinating thing. Rav Steinman asked the following question to Rabbi Yosef. I'm talking about one extremely great person to another. So Rav Steinman asked Rabbi Yosef the following question. He said there was a Baal Tshuva that was holding by the point that he was ready to accept one thing. And Rav Steinman asked Rabbi Yosef, should it be to keep Shabbos or to keep Tyrus HaMishpacha? That was the question. Now, a person's gut would say that it should be Shabbos. First of all, Shabbos is more serious than Taras Mishpacha. They're both serious, but Shabbos is a death sentence. It's a skila, stoning, while Taras Mishpacha is only karas. Also, somebody's Mechal Shabbos is considered like a mumala kol HaTorah kula. Reb Chaim says it's considered like a goy. So you would think Shabbos comes first before Taras Mishpacha. He asked the great Rabbi Yoshev, and surprisingly, Rabbi Yoshev said he should keep Taras Mishpacha. And he said for two reasons. First of all, Shabbos will only be him. If it's Taras Mishpacha, it's going to save both the man and the wife from curse. Because you can't keep Taras Mishpacha unless your wife agrees to keep it too. Secondly, he said keeping Taras Mishpacha, that the couple should stay away from each other 2 weeks of the month, that's harder. And it's bigger to do what is harder. Now, you have to understand this. Rav Steinman went to interpret that which Rav Shach answered. Rav Steinman said, there's a famous Gemara. The Gemara says that there's a mitzvah of prika, that if an animal falls and is groveling under its load, to unload the animal. And then there's a mitzvah of te'ina, to help load an animal. So normally, the halacha is that prika comes before te'ina. Unloading comes before loading, because unloading the animal also alleviates sar balak chaim, the pain to the animal. And sar balak chaim is doraisa. But then the Gemara says, what about if he has his enemy animal to load and his friend's animal to unload? So the Gemara says he should load his enemy's animal first. So the Gemara says, yeah, but what about Sar Balak Chaim? And Sar Balak Chaim deraisa, the pain of the animal. So the Gemara says, notwithstanding this, Kayif liyitzrei adivtei, to subdue his yetzer is more important. He doesn't want to help his enemy. To go against his nature and help his enemy, that's odiv tvei, that's more important. And therefore, says Rav Steinman, what Rav Yoshev meant is that for a person to keep Taras and Mishpacha, it's even harder than keeping Shabbos. Harder. He has a desire for his wife. It's his wife. For 2 weeks, not to touch her. That's kayif liyitzrei. That's subduing the yetzer. That's odiv tvei. Now, by the way, incidentally, we see over here that as we go through life, the things that we have to be kayif liyitzrei, that we have to subdue our yetzer. For example, shmiras einayim, not to look at eye candy. That's hard for people. So that's a very big reward, the fum tzara agra, because that's kayif liyitzrei, subduing a yetzer. Here's a person, it's Erev Shabbos, and he doesn't yell in the house. It's a very tense time. That's kayif liyitzrei, that's subduing his yetzer. That's odiv tvei. Person normally whisks through Shemona Esrei. Before he knows it, he's already up to Re'ina V'Anyena. What happened? What happened to Chaim Eisim and Atakadish and Slach Lanu? He took the express. A person that slows himself down, kayif liyitzrei odiv tvei. That's what I told you. I said this to you in the past, that there's a famous Mishnah Brura. The Mishnah Brura says that a person who slows down his Kriya Shema to have kavana, mitzanin in loy gehenim. They cool off gehenim for such a person. Because he cooled the fire of his rush. So it's interesting because we said that any two words that end and start with the same letter, you have to pause. So one of them is vavadtem mehera. Vavadtem ends with a mem, mehera starts. If you pause, so you're cooling it up, you won't be avadtem mehera in Gehenna. That's kayef liyitzrei odev tvei. And now on this subject, by the way, there's a well-known opinion of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Zecher Tzadik V'Bracha, Schusi Yogan Aleinu. The Lubavitcher Rebbe said that the first thing a person should take upon themselves is kashrus. Because when a person goes to McDonald's, I told you once a Russian Ola that came from Russia and came to America, the first time he saw the McDonald's sign, he thought that the two yellow loops were for the luchais. He didn't know. He didn't know. But somebody that puts treif into their system is metamteim es halev. They're hardening their spiritual arteries. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe used to say, it's the first thing to get rid of eating the treif. And now I want to share with you an amazing story. Hashem Elikov Imai. There are people that Hashem is with them. There was a time in Russia where the Tsar instituted terrible decrees against the Jews. And the Jews, they ran to the Heilige Reb Itzela Blazer, Reb Itzela from St. Petersburg, the holy man, one of the Amudei HaMusar movement, and they asked him to go to the Tsar. So he went to the Tsar, and the Tsar had a whole list of questions for him. And Rabbi Itzela, in his holiness, in his greatness, was able to answer all the questions. And then the Tsar asked him a stunning question. He said to him, do you pray for the Tsar? So Rabbi Itzela told him, indeed we do. Indeed we do. We have a tefillah where we daven for the Tsar. We say, Hu Yavorech es Hanasi ves Mishneu. So then the Tsar asked him, so here the Jews in Russia pray for the Russian monarch. We have an enemy in Germany. What do the Jews do? So Rav Itzela said, they also say the prayer. So he said, so they pray for the success of the German emperor, our enemy, and you pray for the success of the Tsar. How is it possible? How is it possible to God to fulfill both things? Later on, Rabbi Itzela would tell his Talmidim that he was prepared for many questions, but this question caught him completely off guard. And he said in his mind, he looked up to Hashem, and he asked Hashem for siyata d'shmai. And Hashem gave him siyata d'shmai. It's really a fascinating story. And Hashem gave him like a light bulb, and he told him that if you look at the tefillah that we say for the Tsar, we stick in something that doesn't really sound like it has anything to do with the subject. We say, Hanoisein b'yam derech, he gives in the sea a pathway, U'b'mayim azim, and in the strong seas, nasiva, a path for the boats. So he says, why is this there? So he explained to the Tsar that people on the seas, those that go from east to west, are praying for a strong eastern wind to blow them to the west. And people traveling from the west to the east are praying for a strong western wind in order that they should be blown eastward. And the same thing is true north and south. How is it possible? And yet Hashem allows those traveling from the east to go to the west and those traveling from the west to go to the east. Hashem will also give success to both Germany and to Russia. Hashem, who is capable of everything, is able to do it. The answer made such an impact on the Tsar that he released most of the decrees. When I saw this, Aleinu L'Shabach brings down this story. When I saw this, it reminded me of the one time in my life where I also had a siyata d'shmaya. This happened many years ago. I gave a shiur in Rav Olbaum's shul in Queens. It was a unique shiur because on that day, Yom Kippur was on a Monday. So Erev Yom Kippur was Sunday. So he invited me to give a shiur on Motzi Shabbos in Queens in preparation for the Day of Atonement, for the holiest day of the year. So I came and I gave a shiur. It was a large olam of men and women. And I remember that the yesod of my shiur is that the best defense is to make yourself needed. That was the yesod of the shiur. You know, it's less than 2 months to Elul, so it's okay to talk about it already. That the best defense is to make yourself needed. And the best thing is to be a good husband, a good wife. Because Hashem is loath to break the set of a husband and wife. So if we're needed, even if we do other things wrong, but if we're needed, Hashem won't take us away. The same thing, you're a good parent, so if you're needed, Hashem won't take you away. That's what it says, that Nadav and Avihu died. The Gemara says because they weren't married. The Gemara says because they didn't have children. So the question is, they died because they brought an Eish Zara on the Mizbeach, a foreign fire on the Mizbeach. So the Mefarshim say, of course, that's why they died. But if they would have been married, their wives would have saved them because their wives wouldn't have deserved to lose them. Or the children would have saved them because they wouldn't have deserved to lose them. So after the shiur, a woman came over to me tearfully and said, you know, Rabbi Weiss, I listen to your shiurim, I read your articles. In those days, I think it was in the Country Yossi magazine. I think it was even before the Jewish Press. And I listened to your tapes. This was before CDs. I have a lot of respect for you, but I can't accept what you said. I'm a young widow who just lost her husband. I would like to believe that I need him. And my children, they don't have anybody to learn Gemara with. They don't have anybody to take them to shul. They surely needed their father. Why did Hashem take him away? I remember I felt like I was hit by lightning. And I looked up, I said, Hashem, help me. And I had a flash, which I think is the true answer. And I told her that these defenses are good only if it's not the person's case. If it's not the person's time. We say on Rosh Hashanah, mi bekitza yo mi loy bekitza. If it's a person's time, it doesn't help to be needed. It's his time. Hard time. It's if it's loy bekitza, if a person is dying because of sin, like in the case of Nadav and Avihu, they brought an Eish Zara, then it helps to be needed. For you, however, it was your husband's time. We have two villains in this week's Parsha. Before I address this, again, I want to thank our sponsors this evening, Kirill and Mary Vorobeichik, in memory of Joel Estrada, and our anonymous sponsor, Lila Nishmas Gershon Ben Baruch, and Yehuda Dov Simcha Ben Uri Aaron Yeshaya Kayin. Also ask if anybody would like to sponsor next week's Shiur on Pinchas. We don't have a sponsor yet. Please either text me at 718-916-3100 or email me at rmmwsi, Rav Moshe Meir Weiss, Staten Island, at AOL.com. The sponsor is $360. Also, this Monday night, I will be giving the Q&A, the annual Q&A, in the Irgun Shurei Torah, in the Boston Beis Medrash on Avenue J in Flatbush. Everyone is invited to join us. If you want to be part of our Zoom family and learn the daf with us, so Motzei Shabbos, it's at 10:40 this week, and throughout the week, it's going to be this week at 8:50, 5 minutes earlier. You go to, except for Monday night, there won't be a shiur because of the Q&A, and Tuesday night, because of the Tanis, the shiur will be 10:15. You go to zoomdaf.com and put in meeting code 914408. 914408. There were two villains mentioned in this week's Parsha. One is Balak, and one is Bilam. Both of them have extraordinary yichus. In the Zohar, there was two opinions who Balak was. One opinion is that he was a grandson of Yisro, and one opinion is he was the son of Yisro. Now, the opinion of the Zohar that he was the son of Yisro is really remarkable. That means that he was the brother-in-law of Moshe Rabbeinu. Balak was the brother-in-law of Moshe Rabbeinu, the brother of Tzipora. That's Rabbi Leibel Katz in his Sefer Oyel Aryeh comments that if Balak was the son of Yisro, according to the opinion that Yisro didn't go with Moshe Rabbeinu but went back to be Megaya the rest of his family, it means that he did not merit converting his whole family because he didn't convert Balak. He didn't succeed in converting Balak. And it's what's even more fascinating is, that Yisro is renowned as being the first one to say Baruch. That's what it says in the Gemara in Brachas. The Gemara says that Lo haya Adam she'amar Baruch ad sheba Yisro v'amar Baruch Hashem asher hisrel eschem miyad Paro u'miyad Mitzrayim. So it comes out that the Father instituted Baruch to the world, while Balak hired Bilam to curse the world. By the way, Balak is the same letters as Likav, to curse. That was his whole yichus, that he hired Bilam to curse Klal Yisrael, and Hashem turned it to blessing. So Balak is Likav. It really is a remarkable thing. Also, I want to point out an interesting feature that we all know, the famous Rashi in Parshas Yisro, where Rashi tells us that Yisro had 7 names. Right? Yisro had Yisro, Yeser, right? Chovev, Chever, Reuel, Putiel, and Keni. So Yisro had 7 names. That's a famous Rashi. According to this, Yisro had an 8th name. It says Balak ben Tzipor. If Balak was the son of Yisro, then another name of his was Tzipor. And by the way, it also fits very well because we know that Yisro's daughter, Tzipora, was called Tzipora because she had alacrity like a bird. Right? Remember when the snake came to swallow up Moshe Rabbeinu for delaying the Milah, she hurried up and circumcised. She took the flint and circumcised the child. So she reacted with alacrity. Yisro also reacted with alacrity. When he heard Moshe Rabbeinu that he saved his daughters from the Rayim, he said, hurry up, Kiren loy v'yoichel lechem. Call him. The Gemara tells us lechem is a metaphor for a wife, for a husband, right? We'll get a good husband. He's a remarkable man. He saved all of you. So he also had alacrity. Now, not only was Yisro's yichus fascinating, but Bilam's yichus is also fascinating. Bilam ben Ba'ar, the Targum Yonasan ben Uziel says that Bilam was the same as Lavan ha'Arami. Same person. And now according to this Targum Yonasan ben Uziel, besides the fact that means that Lavan enjoyed incredible longevity, it also means that this now becomes obvious what it says in the Haggadah Shel Pesach. Tzei lamad, right? It says b'chol dar v'dar, in every generation. Oimdin aleinu l'chal oiseinu. So it says tzei lamad ma bikesh Lavan arami la'asais liYaakov Avinu. Now we see that Lavan, who is Bilam, wanted to curse all of Klal Yisrael. Right? Shapar lo gazer ala scharim. But Lavan bikesh la'kares hakol. He wanted to uproot everything. He wanted to curse Gans Klal Yisrael. That's Lavan Arami. These are the two villains that are mentioned in this week's Parsha. I just want to end off. We talked about saying the tefillah for the king, anointing Shiur. There's another prayer which makes a lot of sense to say these days, and that's the tefillah for the chayolim, for the soldiers. I was this week by Rabbi Ruvain Feinstein. I say the tefillah in my shul. I did it in the Agudas Yisrael of Staten Island. I do it in the Agudas Yisrael of Fairways. And I mentioned it to Rabbi Ruvain, and Rabbi Ruvain told me he does it in his home. He has a minyan in his home. Does it in his home. He says the soldiers are our brothers and sisters. Think about, they're in harm's way, going into tunnels, going before ruthless killers that are more than willing to give up their lives to maim, to mutilate, to kill our brothers and sisters. And by the way, when you say the tefillah for the chayolim, for the tzvah haganah Yisrael, you could have in mind that tzala workers too. They rush out. They're tired. They go at intense speed. They're also a tzvah haganah Yisrael. They're also an army that protects Yisrael. We want to thank all of you for joining us. Wish you a good Shabbos and a very good week.